You're talking about
and then
judgment.
Makes the decision. That's right.
So judgment is a key.
Temperament and judgment, yes.
The word
Thank you.
judgment
Someone
has
has
been
to let
used
me
a
out.
lot around you, Secretary
Okay.
Clinton, over the last year and a half, and in particular concerning your use of your personal email and server to communicate while you were Secretary of State. You've said it's a mistake.
All right,
You
we are
said
free
you
on
made not the best
facebooklive.com
choice. You were
/Jesse
communicating on
Torero.
highly sensitive
And we are
topics.
back with
Why
you
wasn't
at
it more than a mistake? Why wasn't it
www.thepowervoices.com
disqualifying
as
if you
they're
wanted
asking
to commit a
questions
mistake?
for Hillary Clinton. I just want to let everybody know on the Facebook feed /Jesse Torero, go over to www.thepowervoices.com and check out the feed that we're bringing in from the Commander-in-Chief Conference tonight, where Hillary Clinton is now on the stand asking questions, and Donald Trump to file in about 25 more minutes. They each have 30 minutes. I just left the bank. That's where I was at, taking care of some last-minute business mobily here, and so we wanted to bring this up and bring this to you. We're going to get back to it right now. And remember, go over to powervoices.com on our Facebook site there for Jesse Torero's Facebook page. Go there and check out what is happening live and real right now.
In the report by the Department of Justice, none of the emails sent or received by me had such a header.
Were some of the emails sent or received by you referring to our drone program, our covert drone program?
Yes, because, of course, there were no discussions of any of the covert actions in process being determined about whether or not to go forward. But every part of our government had to deal with questions, and the Secretary of State's office was first and foremost. So there are ways of talking about the drone program.
And you said you thought your communications on that were fairly routine.
Well, let me say, the FBI just released their report about their investigation. They discussed drone matters in the unclassified section of their report.
But Director Comey also said this after reviewing all the information. He said there is evidence to support a conclusion that any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
Well, Matt, I just respectfully point to the hundreds of experienced foreign policy experts, diplomats, defense officials who were communicating information on the unclassified system because it was necessary to answer questions and to be able publicly to go as far as we could, which was not acknowledging the program. But I would be in Pakistan, as I was on several occasions. There might very well have been a strike. I would be asked in a public setting, in an interview about it. It was known to have happened. We had to have an answer that did not move into classified area, and I think we handled that appropriately.
You mentioned you're in Pakistan. Some of the emails you sent and received happened while you were overseas, and Director Comey also said that while they have no proof, we assessed that it is possible that hostile actors gained access to Secretary Clinton's personal email accounts.
Matt, there is no evidence. Of course, anything is possible, but what is factual is the State Department system was hacked. Most of the government systems are way behind the curve. We've had hacking repeatedly, even in the White House. There is no evidence my system was hacked.
Let us bring in Hallie Jackson of NBC News, who's been covering this campaign. She's getting questions from our veterans. Hallie, who are you with?
Hi, Matt. I'm with Lieutenant John Lester, who will stand with me here.
Up here.
He began his military career by enlisting in the Air Force and then switched over to the Navy before he retired, where he flew P-3 Orions in Desert Storm and in Desert Shield. He's a Republican, and he has this question for you, Secretary Clinton.
Thank you.
Secretary Clinton, thank you very much for coming tonight. As a naval flight officer, I held a top-secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information clearance, and that provided me access to materials and information highly sensitive to my warfighting capabilities. Had I communicated this information not following prescribed protocols, I would have been prosecuted and imprisoned. Secretary Clinton, how can you expect those, such as myself, who were and are entrusted with America's most sensitive information, to have any confidence in your leadership as president when you clearly corrupted our national security?
Well, I appreciate your concern and also your experience, but let me try to make the distinctions that I think are important for me to answer your question. First, as I said to Matt, you know and I know, classified material is designated, it is marked. There is a header so that there is no dispute at all that what is being communicated to or from someone who has that access is marked classified. And what we have here is the use of an unclassified system by hundreds of people in our government to send information that was not marked. There were no headers. There was no statement, top secret, secret, or confidential. I communicated about classified material on a wholly separate system. I took it very seriously. When I traveled, I went into one of those little tents that I'm sure you've seen around the world because we didn't want there to be any potential for someone to have embedded a camera.
For those of you tuning into
try to see
AV
whatever it
TV
is that
Live in
I
the
was
Digital
seeing that
Broadcasting
was
Network, we are
designated, marked,
sending
and headed
over
as
to
classified.
our
So I did
Facebook.com/Power
what
of
I should
Voices
have done, and
Facebook
I take it
page,
very seriously.
because we're
Always
running
have,
the
always will.
Hillary
Sure, thank
Clinton,
you. Thank you
Donald
very much for your
Trump
question.
Commander-in-Chief
Secretary Clinton,
program.
let's talk about
We
your
want
vote
you to
in
go over
favor of the
there
war in
so
Iraq.
that you
You
can
since said it was a mistake.
participate in watching what's going
Obviously,
on
it
as
was
we're
not
bringing
something
that
you said you
video and
would do
audio up
again.
live
I
there
asked
at
before for people to raise their hand if you served in Iraq. Can you do it again?
live,
How
or
do you
are
think these
also
people
on
feel
Facebook,
when the person
facebook.com
running to
forward
be their
slash voice.
commander-in-chief says her vote
As you
to go to
go over
war in
there,
Iraq was a
be able to
mistake?
see
Look,
myself
I
and
think
what we're bringing
that
up for you,
the
because it's very important. These questions are
decision to go to war
Hillary
in
Clinton
Iraq
and Donald Trump
was
to
a
follow
mistake.
at about the bottom of the
And
hour. So
I have said
on
that my voting to
facebook.com
give
Jesse
President
right
Bush
here.
that
Go
authority
on over
was,
site
from
right now.
my perspective, my mistake. I also believe that it is imperative that we learn from the mistakes, like after action reports are supposed to do. And so we must learn what led us down that path so that it never happens again. I think I'm in the best possible position to be able to understand that and prevent it. But I will say this. I'm asking to be judged on the totality of my record. What I've done for our veterans as First Lady, as Senator, what I've done for Gold Star families, working with them to increase the death benefit from $12,000 to $100,000, working with Republicans like Lindsey Graham to get TRICARE for our National Guard members who didn't have health care unless they were deployed, working to provide more support for the care of our veterans, those who were wounded, working with the Fisher family, now into the third generation of caring for our fallen heroes, working with John McCain to raise money for Brooke Medical Center's Intrepid Center to take care of those who are coming back with profound injuries, working on TBI and PTSD and so much more, working with groups to end veteran suicide like TAPS. So
I'm going to
yes,
get to that subject in a second.
there was a mistake. Now, my opponent was for the war in Iraq. He says he wasn't. You can go back and look at the record. He supported it. He told Howard Stern he supported it. So he supported it before it happened. He supported it as it was happening, and he is on record as supporting it after it happened. I have taken responsibility for my decision.
Let me go to another
He
veteran.
refuses to take responsibility for his support.
Let me go to another question.
That is a judgment issue.
Hallie.
Campos, who served in the Air Force for nearly a decade, where she was an intelligence analyst specializing in counterviolent extremism. Like you, Secretary Clinton, she's a Democrat, and she has this question for you.
Thank you.
Secretary Clinton, to your point, you have had an extensive record with military intervention. How do you respond to progressives like myself who worry and have concerns that your hawkish foreign policy will continue? And what is your plan to end wasteful war campaigns in which our peers servicewomen and men continue to be killed and wounded?
Well, I assume you're talking about Iraq because of my vote, and you probably are talking about Libya because of the role that I played in the administration's decision about whether to take on Gaddafi. But before I get to that, let me say very clearly, I view force as a last resort, not a first choice. I will do everything in my power to make sure that our men and women in the military are fully prepared for any challenge that they may have to face on our behalf. But I will also be as careful as I can in making the most significant decisions any president and commander-in-chief can make about sending our men and women into harm's way. With respect to Libya, again, there's no difference between my opponent and myself. He's on record extensively supporting intervention in Libya when Gaddafi was threatening to massacre his population. I put together a coalition that included NATO, included the Arab League, and we were able to save lives. We did not lose a single American in that action. And I think taking that action was the right decision. Not taking it and permitting there to be an ongoing civil war in Libya would have been as dangerous and threatening as what we are now seeing in Syria.
I'm going to jump in. Thank you very much for your question. Let me ask you about the Iran nuclear deal. It was
Right now, what we're doing is we're broadcasting
Secretary,
live
it
at
was begun under you. You started those talks. You have said you
www.powervoices.com,
expect
and we want you to go
Iranians
over
cheat.
to our
You
website
think they'll
there
buy
and
time and
check out the
perhaps stay
broadcast
along
right
that
now
course
that
of
we're
building a
taking
nuclear weapon.
in
If they cheat,
as Hillary Clinton is
Secretary
asked
Clinton, will you have
questions
any course
if
of
she was
action other than a
commander-in-chief
military course of
Trump
action?
to
Would you
follow
enter into
in about
negotiations with
10
them
to
again?
15
Would you
minutes.
go back to
They're
economic
being asked
sanctions knowing
questions
they
by
cheated and are
service
then
people
closer
and
to a
the
nuclear weapon?
panel
Matt, look, let
question
me put this in
askers.
context
So
because
head
this is
on
one of the
over there
most
to
important
www.thepowervoices.com
strategic
or on our Facebook
questions we
page or
face.
YouTube Live. For those of you
When I
watching
became
on
Secretary of
ABTV
State,
Live
the
Entertainment
Iranians
Channel
were
on
on a
our
fast
broadcasting
track
station,
to
head on
acquiring the
over there.
material
You'll be able
necessary
to
to
see
get
the
a
whole feed
nuclear weapon.
list.
That had happened the prior 8 years.
Talking about
They
nuclear
mastered the
weapons.
nuclear fuel cycle, they built covert facilities, they stocked them with centrifuges, and they were moving forward. What was our decision? Our decision was to try to put together an international coalition that included Russia and China to exert the kind of pressure through sanctions that the United States alone could not do.
Right, but you said that
wait,
you
let me
think you're going to cheat.
Look, this is an important issue. I know we're on TV. We don't have a lot of time.
I want to get to a lot of
I
questions.
will talk quickly. But I want people to understand this. So, yes, I put together a coalition. We imposed the sanctions. We got them to the negotiating table. And after I left, we got the agreement. That agreement put a lid on their nuclear weapons program and imposed intrusive inspections. I have said we are going to enforce it to the letter.
Do you think they're playing us?
On the nuclear issue, no. I think we have enough insight into what they're doing to be able to say we have to distrust but verify. What I am focused on is all the other malicious activities of the Iranians. Ballistic missiles, support for terrorists, being involved in Syria, Yemen, and other places, supporting Hezbollah, Hamas. But here's the difference, Matt. I would rather, as president, be dealing with Iran on all of those issues without having to worry as much about their racing for a nuclear weapon. So we have made the world safer. We just have to make sure it's enforced.
Hallie.
I'm with Kenneth Anderson. He's one of our undecided voters here. He considers himself an independent. He earned the rank of sergeant in the Marine Corps, where he was an Arabic translator during 3 tours in Iraq. Kenneth, you have a question for Secretary Clinton.
Yes, Secretary Clinton, last October you said that surveys of veterans showed that they're overall satisfied with their treatment and that the problems with the VA aren't as widespread as they're made out to be. So, do you think the problems with the VA have been made to seem worse than they really are?
Look, I was outraged by the stories that came out about the VA, and I have been very clear about the necessity for doing whatever is required to move the VA into the 21st century, to provide the kind of treatment options that our veterans today desperately need and deserve. And that's what I will do as president. But I will not let the VA be privatized. And I do think there is an agenda out there supported by my opponent to do just that. I think that would be very disastrous for our military veterans. So I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to have a meeting every week in the Oval Office. We're going to bring the VA people, we're going to bring the DOD people, because we've got to have a better fit between getting mustered out and getting into the VA system. Sometimes, and you probably know this, Sergeant, I've met so many vets who get mustered out, who leave the service, they can't find their records from DOD. And those records never make it to the VA. They feel like they're living in a fun house. They have to go over the same things over and over. We're living in a technological world. You cannot tell me we can't do a better job getting that information. And so I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to work with everybody. I'm going to make them work together. And we're going to fix the problems in the VA.
Sergeant, thank you very much for your question. Let's talk about veterans and suicide.
Yes, let's,
It's an alarming story. The population of veterans has a rate of suicide far above the general population.
20 suicides a day.
What are you going to do to stop it?
Well, this month is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I've spent a lot of time with family members, survivors, who've lost a loved one after he or she came home, sometimes suffering from PTSD or TBI or sexual assault, being handed bags of opioids, not being given an appropriate treatment to help that particular person, which is something, to go back to the sergeant's question, we have to change. So I rolled out my mental health agenda last week, and I have a whole section devoted to veterans' mental health. And we've got to remove the stigma. We've got to help people currently serving not to feel that if they report their sense of unease, their depression, that somehow it's going to be a mark against them. We have to do more about addiction, not only drugs, but also alcohol. So I have put forth a really robust agenda, working with a lot of the VSOs and other groups like TAPS who have been thinking about this and trying to figure out what we're going to do to help our veterans re-enter civilian life and live full, productive lives.
Hallie?
I'm with Ernie Young. Come on up here with me, a former Army captain who led troops during tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's an independent voter, and you have a question for the Secretary.
Secretary Clinton, as an Army veteran, the Commander-in-Chief's ability to empathize with service members and their families is important to me. The ability to truly understand implications and consequences of your decisions, actions, or inactions. How will you determine when and where to deploy troops directly into harm's way, especially to combat ISIS?
As briefly as you can.
We have to defeat ISIS. That is my highest counterterrorism goal. And we've got to do it with air power. We've got to do it with
for those of you who are on
ADTV
Live
Kurds
and
who
the
will fight on the ground against ISIS. We have to squeeze them by continuing to support
I'm asking you to
the Iraqi military. They've taken back Ramadi, Fallujah. They've got to hold them. They've got to now get into Mosul. We're going to work to make sure that they have the support. They have special forces, as you know. They have enablers. They have surveillance, intelligence, reconnaissance help. They are not going to get ground troops. We are not putting ground troops into Iraq ever again, and we're not putting ground troops into Syria. We're going to defeat ISIS without committing American ground troops. So those are the kinds of basis. And remember, when I became Secretary of State, we had 200,000 troops deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm very grateful that we have brought home the vast majority of those. We have a residual force, as you know, in Afghanistan. We have built up several thousands of the folks that I've talked about who are assisting in the fight against ISIS. But it is in our national security interest to defeat ISIS, and I intend to make that happen. As part of it, we're going after Baghdadi, the leader, because it will help us focus our attention, just like going after bin Laden helped us focus our
Secretary-
attention in the fight against al-Qaeda
Secretary Clinton?
in the Afghanistan-Pakistan
I am
theater.
fast running out of time. I want to get to one that concerns just about everybody in this country, and that is terror attacks on our soil.
Right.
Either directed by ISIS or inspired by ISIS. Would your message as the next president of the United States or potential next president be to Americans that we simply are living in the reality that those attacks will happen? And can you guarantee people that after 4 years of a Clinton presidency, they'll be safer on the streets of San Bernardino or Boston than they are today?
Well, Matt, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that that's the result. I'm not going to, promise something that I think most thinking Americans know is going to be a huge challenge, and here's why. We've got to have an intelligence surge, and we've got to get a lot more cooperation out of Europe, out of the Middle East. We have to do a better job of not only collecting and analyzing the intelligence we do have, but distributing it much more quickly down the ladder to state and local law enforcement. We also have to do a better job combating ISIS online, where they recruit, where they radicalize. And I don't think we're doing as much as we can. We need to work with Silicon Valley. We need to work with our experts in our government. We have got to disrupt. We have got to take them on in the arena of ideas that unfortunately pollute and capture the minds of vulnerable people. So we need to wage this war against ISIS from the air, on the ground, and online in cyberspace. And here at home, for goodness sakes, we have to finally pass a law prohibiting people on the terrorist watch list from being able to buy a gun in the United States of America. So we've got work to do. I know we can do that work. I'm meeting with a group of terror experts, counterterrorism experts. But I want to just say one additional thing.
I've got 30 seconds left.
Matt Olson, the former director of the National Center on Counterterrorism, has a great article out today saying the last thing we need to do is to play into the hands of ISIS, going after American Muslims, defaming a Gold Star family, the family of Captain Khan, making it more difficult for us to have a coalition with Muslim-majority nations.
And we tried to have an
That is
agreement.
not going to help us succeed in defeating ISIS and protecting our American homeland.
Secretary Hillary Clinton, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
All right. Can you come on along?
I know. We're going to take a break. We're going to have much more.
Jesse Terrell here, broadcasting live mobily out in Valencia, California. And we just heard Hillary Clinton, the commander-in-chief, her part of the episode tonight. The first half hour, she had the opportunity to get up there and answer questions both from servicemen and servicewomen, also the question answers. Matt Lowry and the other person were part of the panel asking questions. Some very significant things and some very significant questions, much harder than she has been accustomed to answering here in the public forum, that is, as she has not had too many press conferences over the last year and a half. What's your take on it, Lee?
I thought it was a very interesting exchange of questions, and her answers were pretty pointed and clear. And I think she got over some points and may have taken away some of the question out of some of the voters' minds. They either agree or disagree with her, clearly.
Lee Michaels, everybody. He does the 10 to 12 show here Monday through Friday, and we both have a very similar show in terms of our discussions in politics. What do you think about the first question that she had to entertain, and that first question talked about where she kind of evaded Matt Lowry's question and kind of stepped aside of that issue in the very first question? What are your feelings about that?
I'm not sure which one was the first question because I was doing things internally here to make sure the show was up and running. By the way, you may need to back away from your mic a little bit. It's kind of pumping in and out. Like it's
Okay, that's fine. All right, is that a little
yeah,
bit better as we
yeah,
are about ready to get to Trump? Well, she
that's
talked
better.
about a couple of things. One was the last topic was ISIS and what she was going to do or wanted to do to stem terrorism here in the United States of America. I thought that she very eloquently left out the idea of changing our immigration system and revitalizing and renewing that so that we could vet people from all parts of the world coming into the country. Because as we know, some of these terrorists are seeping in and becoming radicalized or radicalizing their spouses and partners while they're here. That's what happened in San Bernardino. I thought the question about the VA was very interesting because with the lady who was just brought down on charges ahead of the VA. We know that the VA is completely in disarray, but to look at the VA and not look at all alternatives in terms of even privatizing it in some way or fashion, we've got to really look at that out of the box because it's just not working for our veterans. And I think she was real soft on that answer. What are your feelings about that, Lee?
Well, I think they're coming back now with Donald Trump, so we'll probably just got a few seconds listening to it in queue here. But I think her answer about the email was pretty clear, bringing on Donald Trump now, that there's no proof that the email was compromised.
Well, the one thing I will say before we bring Donald Trump on, refraining back to the first question, was she sidestepped the issue of the emails by saying by using secret words and secret language. What does the C stand for? What does confidentiality stand for? What does that stand for? I don't think that she clearly defined that difference with the answer that she attempted to make on that question. Let's bring up Donald Trump right now
Here's the first question.
and see his portion of the Commander-in-Chief program right here on thepowervoices.com.
Anytime you talk to a president, they'll tell you the most daunting part of the job is the role of Commander-in-Chief.
Right.
What have you experienced in your personal life or your professional life that you believe prepares you to make the decisions that a Commander-in-Chief has to make?
Well, I've built a great company. I've been all over the world. I've dealt with foreign countries. I've done very well, as an example, tremendously well dealing with China and dealing with so many of the countries that are just ripping this country. They are just taking advantage of us like nobody's ever seen before. And I've had great experience dealing on an international basis. I look today and I see Russian planes circling our planes. They're taunting us. I see in Iran, I see the boats taunting our ships, our destroyers.
But what have you done in your life that
very
prepares you to send men and women of the United States into harm's way?
Well, I think the main thing is I have great judgment. I have good judgment. I know what's going on. I've called so many of the shots. And I happened to hear Hillary Clinton say that I was not against the war in Iraq. I was totally against the war in Iraq. You can look at Esquire magazine from '04. You can look at before that. And I was against the war in Iraq because I said it's going to totally destabilize the Middle East, which it has. It has absolutely been a disastrous war. And by the way, perhaps almost as bad was the way Obama got out. That was a disaster.
People talk about you and Commander-in-Chief, and not just Secretary Clinton, but some of your Republican opponents in the primary season, and they wonder about your temperament. And they say, does Donald Trump have the temperament to be Commander-in-Chief? You said something recently that I found interesting. You admitted that sometimes in the heat of a debate or when you're talking about a lot of issues, you say things that you later regret. So can we afford that with a Commander-in-Chief, to have a Commander-in-Chief who says things that he later regrets?
Well, when you say regret, yeah, sure, I regret. But in the meantime, I beat 16 people in here. You know, to a certain extent, there is a regret. I would have liked to have done it in a nicer manner. But I had 16 very talented people that I had to go through, and that was a lot of people.
But when you say
that was a record, Matt. That was a record in the history of Republican politics. I was able to get more votes than anybody ever has gotten in the history of Republican politics.
But when you say inflammatory things in a presidential campaign, it's different than saying them when you're Commander-in-Chief. If you say things you regret when you're Commander-in-Chief, you can spark a conflict, you can destabilize a region, you can put American lives at risk. Can we afford to take that risk with you?
Well, I think absolutely. I think if you saw what happened in Mexico the other day, where I went there, had great relationships, everything else. I let them know where the United States stands. I mean, we've been badly hurt by Mexico, both on the border and with taking all of our jobs, or a big percentage of our jobs. And if you look at what happened, look at the aftermath today, where the people that arranged the trip in Mexico have been forced out of government. That's how well we did.
Back in August.
And that's how well we're going to have to do, Matt.
Back in August, when you admitted that you regret some of the things you said, you also said this: I can promise you this, I will always tell you the truth.
It's true.
So let me read some of the things you said. I know more about ISIS than the generals do. Believe me. Was that the truth?
Well, the generals under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton have not been successful.
Do you know more about ISIS than they do?
I think under the leadership of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, the generals have been reduced to rubble. They have been reduced to a point where it's embarrassing for our country. You have a force of 30,000 or so people. Nobody really knows, but probably 30,000 people. And I can just see the great, as an example, General George Patton spinning in his grave as ISIS we can't beat.
Yeah, you said if we had MacArthur today, or if we had Patton today, we would not have ISIS. That the rise of these military commanders that we have today, they come up the chain of command, and by the time they get to the top, they're too politically correct. And we know that's not a compliment coming from you. Have you lost faith in the military commanders?
I have great faith in the military. I have great faith in certain of the commanders, certainly, but I have no faith in Hillary Clinton or the leadership. You look at what's happened, and, you know, when she comes in and starts saying, oh, I would have done this, I would have been... She's been there for 30 years. I mean, we need change, Matt. We have to have it, and we have to have it fast.
Let's go to Hallie Jackson in our crowd. Hallie.
I'm with Philip Clay, who was a public affairs officer in the Marine Corps. He spent a year in Anbar province in Iraq. He left the military with the rank of captain.
You're hardly the first politician to promise a quick victory and a speedy homecoming. So, assuming we do defeat ISIS, what next? What is your plan for the region to ensure that a group like them doesn't just come back?
Sure. I mean, part of the problem that we've had is we go in, we defeat somebody, and then we don't know what we're doing after that. I mean, we lose it. Like, as an example, you look at Iraq, what happened, how badly that was handled. And then when President Obama took over, likewise, it was a disaster. It was actually somewhat stable. I don't think could ever be very stable. It's a war we should have never gone into in the first place. But he came in, he said, when we go out, and he took everybody out. And really, ISIS was formed. This was a terrible decision, and frankly, we never even got a shot. And if you really look at the aftermath of Iraq, Iran is going to be taking over Iraq. They've been doing it, and it's not a pretty picture. And I think you know, and because you've been watching me, I think, for a long time, I've always said, shouldn't be there, but if we're going to get out, take the oil. If we would have taken the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS, because ISIS formed the largest oil reserves in the world, in the entire world. And we're the only ones. We go in, we spend $3 trillion, we lose thousands and thousands of lives, and then, Matt, what happens is we get nothing. You know, it used to be to the victor belong the spoils. Now, there was no victor there, believe me, there was no victor. But I always said, take the oil. One of the benefits we would have had if we took the oil is ISIS would not have been able to take oil and use that oil
Let me stay on ISIS
to fuel themselves.
Let me stay on ISIS. When we've met in the past and we've talked, you say things like, I'm going to bomb the expletive out of them very quickly. And when people like me press you for details, like that gentleman just said, on what your plan is, you very often say, I'm not going to give you the details because I want to be unpredictable.
Absolutely, the word is unpredictable.
But yesterday, you actually told us a little bit about your plan in your speech. You said this, quote, we're going to convene my top generals, and they will have 30 days to submit a plan for soundly and quickly defeating ISIS. So is the plan you've been hiding this whole time asking someone else for their plan?
No. But when I do come up with a plan that I like and that perhaps agrees with mine or maybe doesn't, I may love what the generals come back with. I will convene.
But you have your own plan.
I have a plan, but I want to be. I don't want to. Look, I have a very substantial chance of winning. Make America great again. We're going to make America great again. I have a substantial chance of winning. If I win, I don't want to broadcast to the enemy exactly what my plan is. And let me tell you, if I like maybe a combination of my plan and the general's plan, or the general's plan, if I like their plan, Matt, I'm not going to call you up and say, Matt, we have a great plan. This is what Obama does. We're going to leave Iraq on a certain
But
date.
you're going to convene a panel of generals, and you've already said you know more about ISIS than those generals.
Well, there'd probably be different generals, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm looking at the generals. Today, you probably saw, I have a piece of paper here, I could show it, 88 generals and admirals endorsed me today.
It's a numbers
and these
game.
Are
Hillary
great.
Clinton
well,
claims
not
more
really.
numbers.
It's not, yeah, numbers. People that have been losing for us for a long period of time. I mean, the fact is, we have had the worst, and you could even say the dumbest, foreign policy. Our results are so bad. We would have been better off had we never, ever spent $2 in that part of the world.
You recently received 2 intelligence briefings.
Yes, I did.
Did anything in that briefing, without going into specifics, shock or alarm you?
Yes.
Did
Very
you
much
learn
so.
new things
First of all,
in that
I had
briefing?
great respect for the people that gave us the briefings. They were terrific people. They were experts on Iraq and Iran and different parts of the world, and Russia. But yes, there was one thing that shocked me, and it just seems to me that what they said, President Obama and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, who is another total disaster, did exactly the opposite.
Did you learn anything in that briefing, again, not going into specifics, that makes you reconsider some of the things you say you can accomplish, like defeating ISIS quickly?
No, I didn't learn anything from that standpoint. What I did learn is that our leadership, Barack Obama, did not follow what our experts and our truly, when they call it intelligence, it's there for a reason, what our experts said to do.
How?
And I was very, very surprised in almost every instance. And I could tell, I am pretty good with the body language, I could tell they were not happy. Our leaders did not follow what they were recommending.
Hallie?
I'm with former Army Captain Sue Fulton, who is a member of the first West Point class to include women. She served as a Signal Corps officer in Germany.
You're listening to www.thepowervoices.com.
Mr. Trump,
Hi, thank you very much.
thank you. Do you believe that an undocumented person who wants to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces deserves to stay in this country legally?
I think that when you serve in the armed forces, that's a very special situation, and I could see myself working that out, absolutely.
So she's saying has already served in the armed forces or wants to serve, plans to serve?
Plans to serve in the armed forces. As you know, that under DACA,
Yes.
we already have people who are undocumented
I
who are
think
serving.
military is a very special thing. If they plan on serving, if they get in, I would absolutely hold those people. Now, we have to be very careful. We have to vet very carefully. Everybody would agree with that. But the answer is it would be a very special circumstance, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Hallie, you have another one?
I do. Alex Rudkovsky was an Army staff sergeant assigned to special operations. He was stationed at Fort Bragg and was deployed to Afghanistan and to other places across the Middle East. He has not decided who he will vote for yet in November. And you have a question for Mr. Trump.
I do. Mr. Trump, as you know, tensions between the United States and Russia have been at the highest level since the Cold War. In your first 120 days of presidency, how would you de-escalate the tensions? And more importantly, what steps would you take to bring Mr. Putin and the Russian government back to the negotiating table?
I think I would have a very good relationship with many foreign leaders. I think it's very sad when you look at Barack Obama, as an example, lands Air Force One in China, and they don't want to put out stairs to get off the plane. And he has to use the stairs that mechanics use to get up and down to fix the plane. They wouldn't give him stairs. I think it's very sad when he lands in Saudi Arabia and he lands in Cuba, and there aren't high officials to even greet him. This is the first time in the storied history of Air Force One. I think I would have a very, very good relationship with Putin, and I think I would have a very, very good relationship with Russia. As I said, take a look today. Take a look at what happened with their fighter jets circling one of our aircraft in a very dangerous manner. Somebody said less than 10 feet away. This is hostility. And I saw just 2 or 3 days ago, they looked like they were not exactly getting along. But I looked at President Obama and Putin staring at each other. These were not two people that were getting along. And you know the beautiful part of getting along? Russia wants ISIS as badly as we do. If we had a relationship with Russia, Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could work on it together and knock the hell out of ISIS? Wouldn't that be a wonderful
Let me ask
thing?
you about some of the things you've said about Vladimir Putin. You said, I will tell you, in terms of leadership, he's getting an A. Our president is not doing so well. And when referring to a comment that Putin made about you, I think he called you a brilliant leader, you said it's always a great honor to be so nicely complimented by a man so highly respected within his country and beyond.
Well, he does have an 82% approval rating, according to the different pollsters, who, by the way, some of them are based right here. Look.
He's also a guy who annexed Crimea, invaded Ukraine, supports Assad in Syria, supports Iran, is trying to undermine our influence in key regions of the world, and according to our intelligence community, probably is the main suspect for the hacking of the DNC computers.
Well, nobody knows that for a fact. But do you want me to start naming some of the things that President Obama does?
But do you want to be complimented by that former KGB officer?
Well, I think when he calls me brilliant, I'll take the compliment, okay? The fact is, look, it's not going to get him anywhere. I'm a negotiator. We're going to take back our country. You look at what's happening to our country. You look at the depleted military. You look at the fact that we've lost our jobs. We're losing our jobs like we're a bunch of babies. We're going to take back our country, man. The fact that he calls me brilliant or whatever he calls me is going to have zero impact.
But the fact that you say you can get along with him,
I think I'll be able to get along with him.
Do you think the day that you become president of the United States, he's going to change his mind on some of these key issues?
Possibly. It's possible. I don't know, Matt. It's possible.
As Matt Lowry right now
if he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him. I've already said he is really very much of a leader. I mean, you can say, oh, isn't that a terrible
For those of you watching on ABTV Live and the Entertainment Channel on the Digital Broadcasting Network here, we'd like you to chime on over to thepowerofvoices.com and check out what we're doing there. We're bringing the whole Commander-in-Chief episodes, both one with Hillary Clinton and now Donald Trump, to you live right here on thepowerofvoices.com.
If you do that in private business, you get thrown in jail.
Hallie?
Korea, here with me, was in the Army Reserves and spent 10 months in Iraq right at the beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He is a Republican and has this question for you.
Good evening, Mr. Trump.
Hi.
I like what you say about supporting veterans and how they are important, but I haven't heard what the actual plans are to continue that support beyond words. How will you translate those words to action after you take office?
Well, I love that question because I've been very close to the vets. You see the relationship I have with the vets just by looking at the polls. In fact, today a poll came out, and my relationship has been very good. I have a very, very powerful plan that's on my website that you possibly saw. One of the big problems is the wait time. Vets are waiting 6 days, 7 days, 8 days. And by the way, Hillary Clinton 6 months ago said the vets are being treated essentially just fine. There's no real problem. It's over-exaggerated. She did say that.
She went on after that and laid out a litany of problems within the VA.
Look, I mean, she made up half of the things she said about me. I'm telling you, she said she was satisfied with what was going on in the Veterans Administration. Now, under my plan, if you've got to wait, and by the way, people are dying online. They're dying, waiting to get to see a doctor. They're waiting 5 days and 6 days. Under a part of my plan, if they have that long wait, they walk outside, they go to the local doctor, they choose the doctor, they choose the hospital, whether it's public or private, they get themselves better. In many cases, it's a minor procedure or a pill or just a prescription, and they end up dying because they can't get to see the doctor. We will pay the bill. They go outside, they get a doctor, they get a prescription, they do what they have to do, and we pay the bill. That is something that I have been praised. And by the way, I never said take the VA, take it, the Veterans Administration private. I wouldn't do that. Too much respect for our people. I would never do that.
Okay.
I heard it was said that I said that. I would not do that. But I do believe, when you're waiting in line for 6, 7 days, you should never be in a position like that. You go out, you see the doctor, you get yourself taken care of.
Hallie, you've got another question.
I do. Rachel Fredericks, who specialized in aviation's operations in the Marine Corps, serving stateside. She lost 2 friends to suicide, and you now struggle yourself with PTSD. She's a Republican, but leaning towards you, still undecided a little bit too. Rachel, you have a question for Mr. Trump.
I do. Mr. Trump, I wanted to ask what your plan will be to stop 20 veterans a day from killing themselves.
And actually, it's 22. And it's almost impossible to conceive that this is happening in our country. 20 to 22 people a day are killing themselves. A lot of it is they're killing themselves over the fact that they're under tremendous pain and they can't see a doctor. We're going to speed up the process. We're going to create a great mental health division. They need help. They need help. They need tremendous help. And we're doing nothing for them. The VA is really almost, you could say, a corrupt enterprise. If you look at what's going on, as an example, Matt, in Arizona, where they caught people stealing and they can't even do anything about it. They can't even fire the people. So we are going to make it.
As president, what specifically would you do to support all victims of sexual assault in the military?
It's a great question, and it's a massive problem. The numbers are staggering, hard to believe even, but we're going to have to run it very tight. I, at the same time, want to keep the court system within the military. I don't think it should be outside of the military, but we have to come down very, very hard on that, and your daughter is absolutely right. It is a massive problem, but we have to do something about that problem, and the best thing we can do is set up a court system within the military. Right now, the court system practically doesn't exist. It takes too long.
In 2013, on this subject, you tweeted this, quote, 26,000 unreported sexual assaults in the military, only 238 convictions. What did these geniuses expect when they put men and women together?
Well, it is a correct tweet. There are many people that think that that's absolutely correct, and we need to have a strength.
So this
and we
should
need
have
to
been
have...
expected, and does that mean the only way to fix it is to take women out of the military?
And by the way, since then it's gotten worse. No, not to kick them out, but something has to be happening. Right now, part of the problem is nobody gets prosecuted. You have reported, and the gentleman can tell you, you have the report of rape, and nobody gets prosecuted. There are no consequences. When you have somebody that does something so evil, so bad as that, there has to be consequence for that person. You have to go after that person. Right now, nobody's doing anything. Look at the small number of results. I mean, that's part of the problem.
So many of the issues that we've talked about with you, Mr. Trump, tonight and Secretary Clinton are so complex that even career military people and career diplomats and politicians have trouble getting their arms around it. Right. You've had a very different background in business. So nobody would expect over the last 20 years really deep dives into some of these issues. But I'm curious about what you're doing now. What kind of research are you doing now? What kind of homework are you doing? What kind of things are you reading as you prepare for the day in 2 months where you might be elected the next president of the United States?
Well, in the front row, you have 4 generals, you have admirals, we have people all throughout the audience that I'm dealing with. Right here is a list that was just printed today of 88 admirals and generals that I meet with and I talk to.
How much time are you spending on this?
A lot, and I'm doing a lot of different things. Don't forget, we're running a big campaign. We're doing very well. I'm also, and I'm very much giving it to my children and my executives to run. I'm also partially running a business. I'm campaigning. I'm running a business. I'm got a lot of hats right now. But we're doing very well. But in the meantime, I am studying, and I'm meeting constantly. You see General Flynn, and you see some of the folks that we have, and they're scattered throughout the audience. So we have admirals, we have generals, we have colonels, we have a lot of people that I respect. And I think I've learned a lot, but I think also, I really feel I have a common sense on the various issues that you're talking about.
But you said in a speech today, you said, history shows that when America is not prepared is when the danger is the greatest.
And we're not prepared.
Will you be prepared on day one, if you're elected president of the United States, to tackle these complex national security issues?
100%. Matt, again, she made a mistake on Libya. She made a terrible mistake on Libya. And the next thing, I mean, not only did she make the mistake, but then they complicated the mistake by having no management once they bombed you-know-what out of Gaddafi. I mean, she made a terrible mistake on Libya, and part of it was the management after effect. I think that we have great management talents, great management skills, and I have to totally prepared. But remember this, I've found this subject and these subjects of interest, all of it hasn't been over the last 14 months. I've found these subjects of tremendous interest. That's why they were asking me about Iraq.
Chief, to that moment where you're going to have to make that first decision that puts American men and women in harm's way.
I think it's the most difficult decision you can possibly ever make. You're talking about death, and we're talking death to not just our side. We're talking death all over. I would be very, very cautious. I think I'd be a lot slower. She has a happy trigger. You look, she votes for the war.
But
She
have
goes
you
into
thought
Libya.
about personally the emotional burden of that
I
moment?
think it's a tremendous burden. I think there is no greater burden than anybody could have. I've been preparing this for a long time. And, you know, my theme is make America great again. We're going to make America great again. But, Matt, we've also got to make America strong again. And right now we are not strong. Believe me, we have a depleted military. We have the greatest people in the world in our military, but it is very sadly depleted.
The Republican nominee for President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Thank you, Matt.
We're going to break right now from the broadcast. Commander Chief guest, bring back into the studio. This is Jesse Terrero. The Brown Beauty's on duty with you. 5 at 5 is the Jesse T Show, straight on the point, and you entered the world of Terrero. Never know what we're going to do next. We are always going to bring you the most informative program and the most interesting and entertaining programs that we can bring to you. Controversial they may be, but today's program, we thought it was very, very special to be able to hear both of these participants running for president at the same place at the same time. The debate on the 26th is coming up in September, but this was really a terrific skew on the differences between the two, and there was a dramatic difference between the two. I do want to say I thought Matt Lowry was very soft on Hillary Clinton and very difficult on Donald Trump. I thought that Matt Lowry was not a partial person that really showed partial. He was impartial. He clearly would interrupt Donald Trump every time he would talk about Hillary Clinton, and he would not do that with Hillary Clinton every time she talked about Donald Trump in that respect. And the questions that were asked of Donald Trump were vastly different than the questions that were asked of Hillary Clinton. What's your take on that, Lee?
I thought they asked questions that were of interest to the voting public. I didn't hear it the way you did. I thought there were pretty pointed questions to both of them. I mean, the email questions for Clinton, that's a top question that a lot of people are still debating. And she gave her answer. I think that, he asked some tough questions to Donald as well. And I think both of the candidates answered quite well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The questions that were weathered to them both, they both addressed the questions quite well. And it clearly shows a defining difference between the two candidates themselves. And the beauty of the way they set up this program today was, I think that was very successful in showing the differences that these two people have in that respect. It really is a great lead-in to the September 26th debate that's going to take place here, coming up here very shortly in just less than a couple of weeks. Hey, this has been a great show. I appreciate your time hanging out with us, Lee, and giving your 2 cents in there. Though, I disagree with most of everything you say.
I saw your facial expressions when both candidates were talking.
Oh,
so
Lord,
you're very
right.
unfiltered there. So
yeah, well,
we
they
know.
were out here in the parking lot of Citibank in Valencia. I was creating a show out here. People are wondering, what the heck is this guy talking to himself? But hey, it was a terrific.
Looking at you.
It was a terrific use of technology. That's what we do here. We try to bring you this stuff, unscripted, right down, raw and real, nitty gritty. That's what the Jesse T Show is all about from 5 to 6. We can have our differences, Lee, Baby Michaels, and I, but the one thing we do agree on, both these guys, that's the best we got.
It comes down to who do you trust the most?
It really does. It comes down to that.
Who
and
do
it
you
also
believe?
comes down to what taste in terms of governance that you like. But hey, it's a Jesse T Show live at 5, Monday through Friday right here. You're straight on the point on thepowerofvoices.com. Get those free apps so you can mainline to us in all our great programming as we come up to the end of the show. Hey, I've got to go. I got to hit the road running. Got to do what I got to do. Can't help but being me, Jesse T. The Brown Beauty is off duty. See ya. Yeah.